KPI inflation. Hello and welcome to today's podcast where I'll be talking about the effects of inflation on your KPIs. Now, KPIs stand for key performance indicators, and any business should have, all businesses should have KPIs. Most of them do, some don't, which is a separate topic in itself. But KPIs are basically measures of performance. So in other words, if you are driving a car, you don't have to be a car technician or the inventor or designer of that car. Just by looking at the dashboard, you can see what the speed is, what the revs are of your engine if you have a combustion engine, the temperature of your oil, how much fuel you have left, maybe the temperature outside, and a few other things that are important for the well-being of the machine you're operating, i.e. your car. So the same refers to a business. You can sort of present a few numbers, a few measurements that you track on a daily, weekly, sometimes monthly basis, and you know how you are performing. One of the main KPIs that any business should have is related to money. Most financial business books will tell you that the most important KPI is sales, just the sales. I don't necessarily agree with that because at the end of the day, I believe businesses should be profitable. So what we measure at Steelo is something called the contribution margin, which is basically how much money is left when you take away the hard costs of material to fulfill that order. But I won't make it complicated. I won't stick to our X points. Let's talk about a simple financial KPI. So let's assume you run a business, and for that business to cover its cost and also make a profit, you need, let's say, £100,000 worth of turnover. Now that is all nice, and assuming you started a business a few years ago, that KPI probably was very stable. Unless you were growing, that could have changed. But let's say you've reached a point where the operations are the same, you're not growing, and that stabilizes. So what happens is all the people within the business, from the very beginning to the very end of the fulfillment process, or from your sales through to other fulfillment departments, and if you deliver stuff down to logistics, everyone will know that £100,000 worth of turnover is good, sometimes good enough for the business. Now, most probably KPIs aren't represented in a sort of currency figure, just so that some reason it's hidden away. I mean, there are various reasons why that is, but very often they are tied down to money. So, but again, for the explanation, I just want to use the currency example. So, if you have £100,000 worth of turnover, everyone learns that that is the target. Everything's good until inflation kicks in, as we've been experiencing recently. And then suddenly you realize that the cost of running the business are going up. The cost of material is going up. Everything is going up. The biggest problem, though, is that everyone in their minds have the £100,000 as the target. And we have tried to somehow explain to everyone that, look, based on inflation and the increased material costs and everything else, we have to change our mindset. The 100,000 in the past, it should now be £130,000. Now, it's very similar in trading, where there is this human psychology that kicks in, and there are natural floors or ceilings. Quite often the exchange ratio, let's say the cable, which is the way to explain sterling dollar or dollar pound, historically that has always been above 1, so you can buy more dollars for a pound. And when there was this situation after Liz Truss came in and suddenly everything went pear-shaped, everyone was fearing that this will revert itself, and there was so much talk about it. From an economical perspective, it really didn't matter. I mean, it could be one way or the other, but it is the psychology that kicks in. It's like, oh my God, how come you can buy less dollars for a pound than you could have in the past? So this was a natural flaw, and everyone reacted as hard as they could, even with the Bank of England kicking in, just so that they don't touch that flaw. Whereas in our KPI, we're talking about ceilings. The £100,000 target KPI has become an engraved ceiling throughout your company. Now, the truth is that this should be a glass ceiling, something you can actually break through and just pierce above. But again, it all falls back onto psychology, where the sales team assume that 100,000 historically was always a number, and if we had £100,000 this month, that means it was a busy month. If you break that down onto daily sales, so divide the 100,000 by 20 working days, and it's £5,000 a day. So the 5,000 will still stick in their minds as the target. So if you tell them, well, look, guys, we now need to do £6,000, yes, they might understand it. They might say, yes, we know we need £6,000. But even when they hit £5,000 the next day, they'll feel that they've hit their target because it's so engraved in their DNA. Production, like in our case, they'll also say, oh yeah, it's £5,000 per day. Yeah, that's more than enough. We'll be busy. And when they see that there's £6,000 worth of sales, they'll think, oh my God, we need to do overtime. But the problem is that with inflation, the KPI naturally changes. So we find it very interesting. And the question is, what do? Do you try and play with human psychology, or do you actually start playing behind the scenes almost with the KPI itself? You could easily introduce a factor, a sort of number that you multiply it by, let's say 0.9 or 0.85, whatever it is, and then suddenly the results still show the figure in sterling, but it is at a reduced rate. And in that case, everyone could still aim for the £5,000 per day or £100,000 per day, which in reality on your P&L, on the profit and loss report, it will show as, let's say, £130,000. So it's an interesting sort of dilemma. Which way do you go? And I'll be interested to hear your thoughts. Would you try and work with your people to explain how inflation affects our KPIs, or behind the scenes, would you introduce a factor that would artificially reduce it so that everyone can remain within their comfort zone, the £100,000 per month? Bearing in mind that the £100,000 will no longer be actually pounds, it will just become a measure of something, and you would then have to always multiply it by the factor or divide it so that you can work out how much actually money is coming in. Please remember to subscribe to our podcast. Please answer the question, what are your thoughts on this dilemma, and speak to you soon. Thank you.